I invite you to keep your hymnals out and to turn to reading number 668, and we will read this responsively. Its title is Faith Cannot Save. I'll read the bold, you get to read the italic. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm, and eat your fill," and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I, by works, will show you my faith. Thank you, that was fun. When I began my studies in seminary, a young, naive, 24-year-old, enthusiastic to become a Unitarian Universalist minister, I was unaware of all the things that I did not know. Make that all the things that I did not know. I had bought the books for my classes and arrived ready for my first class, excited. The Bible I had brought to my class was one I had bought many years earlier for a class at a college that I had been in, and now, you should hear that as I had had it for a number of years. It sat on the bookshelf. Class began, as all classes at my particular seminary did, with 10 minutes of silent prayer, and my mind wandered. I flipped quietly through my Bible, and I found something I didn't expect. Class began. The professor introduced the Hebrew scriptures and explained his approach to teaching. I took notes. Time passed. We reached our break. I showed my new friend sitting next to me what I had found during the prayer time. The New Testament was at the back of my Bible. Torn between laughing and crying, my classmate explained to me that most Bibles do in fact contain both the Old and the New Testament. Now I was the one torn between laughing and crying. How had I, a lifelong church-going woman, managed to miss out on the fact that the standard versions of the Bible contained both the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures? That evening, on the phone with my parents, I found out. When I told my parents of my discovery, my mother was shocked, and my father said, "Of course, you're a good Jewish girl." We realized that in part he was right. My father's mother had a Hebrew Bible, and my mother's mother a large print New Testament. In our home, they really were frequently two separate books. Here is where the problem comes to light. We as Unitarian Universalists pride ourselves on being able to discuss anything. We can discuss the latest novels, great films, and the weather. We can discuss travel to foreign lands, politics, national and local, even international, and policy, as well as the local sporting teams. We can discuss land management and architecture, fine foods and wine. We can discuss gardening, knitting, goddesses, and baseball players. We can discuss beers and motorcycles and ballerinas. We can discuss reggae, hip-hop, and country music, and the list goes on and on. There is one thing that many Unitarian Universalists are uncomfortable, if not unwilling, to discuss. What is that one thing that was that was told just a few weeks ago by someone in my congregation that no one in our congregation would want to hear about: the Christian scriptures. Why is that? Is it because it contains ideas and words, terms and thoughts that make people uncomfortable, such as Jesus, God, and Christ? This service is about that topic. It is about the Christian scriptures, more commonly known as the Holy Bible. So let me break that down a bit for you. Historically, Unitarians and Universalists read the Bible. Historically, Unitarians and Universalists had Bibles in their churches, and Scripture was shared in our worship services. Over time, however, that changed, and by the time I was a child growing up in UU churches, it was a lot more likely to hear a reading from the New York Times or the New Yorker magazine than from the Christian Scriptures. Why is that? I'm not certain, but my best guess is that people started joining UU churches as a refuge from other churches whose theology they had not felt comfortable with. And when they left those churches behind, they wanted to leave everything about them behind, and our clergy complied. And in time, our services and the life of our congregations became devoid of references to anything that resembled traditional church, except, of course, for the fact that we continued to gather in church buildings on Sunday mornings and conduct a program that followed a pattern set forth in traditional Protestant worship. This service and sermon is about the one book Unitarian Universalists are uncomfortable admitting they own, let alone read. This service is about the Bible and why we as Unitarian Universalists must return to our roots and become comfortable with the texts of the Bible if we ever want to be part of national and international conversations on policy and politics with other people of faith. I will admit that for most of my life, I was in these same shoes. I was raised in 2 Unitarian Universalist congregations. I regularly attended Sunday school. My grandparents were of different faiths, one set Orthodox Jews and the other Protestant. Had I seen Bibles? Of course. And I'm sure I had even had a few conversations about them in Sunday school. But what did I know about the Bible when I graduated Sunday school and into youth group? Very, very little. And did I learn anything about the Bible in youth group? Absolutely not. In college, I was an art major. The applied studies were great. I enjoyed painting, printmaking, and pottery. When I got to art history, however, I began to realize I was missing something. Some underlying knowledge that others seemed to have. I took literature classes, and again, I was missing things. History and sociology also found me wondering why I had to work so much harder to get some of the references that others were picking up on seemingly instantaneously. As my college education progressed, and I explored in depth the art of the Italian Renaissance, I began to realize what it was that I was missing. I was missing a familiarity with classic stories that were the basis of the vast majority of Western art for centuries. Patrick Durant even begins the preface of his book, How to Read Bible Stories and Myths in Art, with these words: "It is stating the obvious to say that the Bible and Greco-Roman mythology and history have had a major impact on Western art. Many of the ancient stories have been illustrated by the greatest painters of all time in the works that rank among the most outstanding masterpieces of art. This is what we miss out on when we choose not to be biblically literate. We miss out on an instant understanding of some of these masterpieces, the complexity of their content, and their backstory. If they have a major impact on art and culture, why is it that we UUs, who pride ourselves on being culturally literate, spend more of our time focusing on stories from modern authors than these historically, biblically based stories? My personal guess is that in previous generations, the generations that moved away from teaching these stories didn't realize how completely we would leave them behind, or how almost phobic our reaction to the traditional texts might become. And I admit fully that phobic is a harsh word, and it is my own word, and I own that in my childhood and youth my own reaction was indeed phobic when it came to the idea of reading the Bible. I did not, however, understand how amazing some of the stories are, and no one helped or encouraged me to make sure I had them as part of my understanding. So today I'm here before you to advocate for becoming more biblically literate. Why do I think we should be more biblically literate? Well, first of all, because we're missing out on a tremendous amount of the world's most powerful art and culture. But that isn't the only reason. It is simply the reason that first brought this failing of mine to my own attention. The reason I think we should be more biblically literate is so that we can be comfortable in conversations with other people. We should be able to be in conversations with politicians, with people of other faiths and other cultures. If we do not understand and hold the biblical texts in our literary arsenal, we cannot even begin to come to the table in conversation, because the Bible is the text that others do come comfortably to the table with as their tool, and at times even as their sledgehammer. What I learned in seminary was that I come to the biblical texts as a Unitarian Universalist with an open mind, and as such I am willing to see the text through wide open eyes. Many of my classmates approached the biblical text through the lens of repetition and dogma. One classmate even told me that he was envious of me because I could look at the Bible as a collection of stories rather than the basis of all of my religious identity and understanding. As Unitarian Universalists, we have an amazing opportunity set before us. We can read this classic of literature, this foundation story of the world's art and culture, without judgment, without lenses crafted by others. As you might have guessed by now, I would not be preaching on this subject if I did not really believe in what I was saying. It would be as easy as a Unitarian Universalist minister to completely avoid preaching on the Bible as it would be to speak on anything else. It would be easy to avoid this topic. It would be easy to suggest that you read anything by any other set of authors. However, I'm here to advocate for each and every one of you picking up a Bible, opening it up, and reading it. I'm encouraging that because I want us to be biblically literate. I want you to feel like you can engage in conversations with people who want to tell us our society should and should not do certain things based on biblical texts, and tell them how they are or are not reading that text in all the ways it could possibly be read. And the only way to do that is to become familiar with the text yourself. So here we are in Pennsylvania, one of the last two northeastern states who have not passed a bill making marriage equality a reality. And we have many people trying to tell us that biblical marriage is what we should be sticking with. Well, having read the Bible, and of course I am not as well versed as I would like to be, but I'm comfortable saying that what the Bible advocates is not one man and one woman. Rather, it advocates one man and as many wives as he can afford. Or, biblical marriage is also the treatment of women as property as they are sold by their fathers to husbands and forced to leave their families and communities. Biblical marriage is also about the exchange of property to prevent war. None of these are the types of marriage that modern advocates of biblical marriage are comfortable having lifted up to them. Marriage as it exists today is a very modern concept and has absolutely nothing to do with the Bible. Where biblical marriage can take us, however, is to the wedding at Cana. What happened at the wedding at Cana? Jesus was told by his mother Mary to help provide wine when they had run out. How did Jesus provide the wine? He turned water into wine. And I'm sure many of you have heard that phrase, turning water into wine. And some of you even knew it came from the Bible. And you probably guessed it had something to do with Jesus. But were you aware that Jesus was not ready to disclose his abilities? That it was only because of Mary's insistence that he did so? Reminding us that listening to our parents, and particularly our mothers, has roots in the Bible, and that the actions and messages of the New Testament and Jesus are tied to the teachings of the Hebrew Scriptures, as Jesus was a Jew and would have lived by the Ten Commandments, which include the commandment to honor thy mother and thy father. Jesus and the stories of Jesus come from the New Testament. The Hebrew Scriptures or the Old Testament also hold stories that are very familiar, like the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the story of Noah and the ark, as well as the stories of Cain and Abel and Abraham and Isaac. These classic stories repeat in today's literature as they were repeated in Shakespeare. We limit ourselves and our children by not educating ourselves. We would not cut out all of Shakespeare or any of all genre of literature because of personal affronts or injuries we suffered at the hands of an English or a history teacher. Why do we cut the Bible out because of the sins of pastors of generations gone by who used this book as a weapon to hold us back? I wonder. I want to encourage each of you to familiarize yourself with the Bible. But I'll tell you straight out, don't begin in the beginning. And don't begin with the King James. It's too hard, it's too flowery, it's not easy to read. Pick up something that's easy to read and find some of the stories. Find them in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and read a few. See what you know, what you have absorbed from our culture. See what other people have told you that was not accurate and what was. We use explore everything for ourselves. Why is it that the Bible hasn't been in that same category? It should be. Really, it should be. Let's put it on our nightstands at the top of our pile of books to read. And I know almost every one of you has a pile of books to read. I'm sure you will find many interesting things in the Bible. Things you might have known, things that might surprise you. You might even learn a thing or two. But most of all, try to enjoy your reading. Salam, amen, and blessed be.